Have any of you ever experienced a forced staycation in a 5-star hotel that costs thousands of dollars a night? Here's a bizarre situation for you. No bars, no handcuffs, you get plush-down bedding and top-tier room service. But the door is locked from the outside, and the only way out is to hand over half of your entire fortune to the state. Does this sound like a movie script? No. It actually happened on the 4th of November 2017 at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. That night, Saudi's most prominent princes, billionaires, and ministers were invited to this hotel all at once. In reality, it wasn't an invitation. It was the most glamorous and ruthless ambush kidnapping in history. What's even more chilling is the identity of the mastermind who locked these giants in a single room. It was Mohammed bin Salman, a young prince who was only 32 at the time, whose name the world barely even recognized. There's a common misconception we have that the Saudi royal family was always in the palm of bin Salman's hand. Not even close. For the past 80 years, Saudi Arabia shared power through a very unique and peaceful method called agnatic succession, passing the throne from brother to brother. This young man overturned that entire complex board, where no one knew which prince's son would eventually become king, in just one night. So, what kind of nerve did this 2-year-old prince have to pull off such a gamble? Was it pure greed? Or was there a real fear we don't know about that was pushing him? From now on, let's look into the true intentions of this man, who changed the destiny of Saudi Arabia without shedding a single drop of blood. Actually, the Saudi royal family had a very unique peacekeeping rule since its founding in 1932, brother-to-brother succession. When the older brother died after being king, the younger brother took over, and so on. Even with hundreds of princes, everyone waited quietly, thinking, my turn will come, while securing their own piece of the pie. You could call it a royals-only relay race. But in 2015, when the current King Salman took the throne, he cut this 80-year tradition short. He put his own son, bin Salman, at the forefront. From that moment, the atmosphere in Saudi changed. Imagine the sharp glares from uncles and cousins who were suddenly wondering, wait, what about my turn? But instead of worrying about them, bin Salman decided to flip the table entirely in November 2017. That was the Ritz-Carlton purge that shocked the world. His justification was clean. We will root out corruption. A brilliant line that no one could argue with. But looking inside, it was brutal. Princes were hauled off to the hotel in lines, and billionaires worth trillions signed pledges to return a significant portion of their assets to the state as a condition for release. Western media reached a cold conclusion. This isn't about justice. It's a bloody purge for a one-man dictatorship. However, bin Salman wasn't someone to be shaken by such criticism. He saw the raw reality of Saudi Arabia more clearly than anyone. On the surface, it looked like a rich country overflowing with oil money. But underneath, it was a time bomb, with an economy addicted only to oil, complicated royal politics, and an outdated bureaucracy. Specifically, the structure where hundreds of royals held every key government position was, in his eyes, the fastest way to ruin the country. Bin Salman realized early on, this system can no longer be sustained. If Saudi doesn't change now, it dies. He moved so ruthlessly not just because he was fearless, but because he judged that he was truly out of time. The oil era was ending, the economy was on the brink of collapse, and the younger generation was demanding change. Ultimately, in his early 30 seconds, he seized control of defense, the economy, and security. His leadership had two faces, incredibly bold or chillingly ruthless. For him, reforming Saudi was not a choice but a command for survival. And to carry out that command, he believed there was no answer other than holding all power in one hand. The day the doors of the Ritz-Carlton were locked tight, Saudi's power stopped being a public good for the entire royal family. It began to belong to one man, Mohammed bin Salman, the birth of an absolute monarch who grabbed power faster and stronger than anyone else. But everyone. The real story starts now, because what he faced after seizing power was a fear much larger than imagined: the end of oil. You'd think you'd be happy if money you could never finish spending kept hitting your bank account, right? But what if the faucet that money comes from could be turned off at any moment? That wouldn't be happiness, it would be terror. That was exactly the case for Saudi Arabia. The real reason bin Salman locked the hotel doors and caused a commotion, was it just because he wanted to be king? No. Behind it all, a massive time bomb was ticking, ready to swallow the entire country. It was the signal that the era of oil is ending. To be honest, until then, Saudi's national management was closer to managing a massive allowance than actual governance. They sold oil, gave subsidies to citizens, created government jobs, and maintained the dignity of the royal family. For over 80 years, the fate of the whole nation hung on oil prices. But starting in the late 2000s, the vibe turned chilly. The US started the shale revolution and turned its back, saying, "We might not need Saudi oil anymore." On top of that, with solar power and electric cars pouring out, the world signaled as if by promise, the value of oil will drop. This fear became a reality in late 2014. International oil prices plummeted by more than half in just 6 months. Saudi's finances immediately went into a deficit, and for the first time in history, they had to issue national bonds to borrow money. At that moment, bin Salman reached a chilling conclusion. Saudi doesn't even need a war to fall. If oil prices stay low for just a few years, this country will simply evaporate. That's how the famous Vision 2030 was born, an ambitious plan to create a country that survives without oil. But this plan, while called reform, is actually quite harsh when you look at the details. Cutting subsidies, raising taxes, shrinking government wages. In short, it's about taking away the free benefits citizens have enjoyed for decades. Think about it. If you suddenly take away something you've given for free for a lifetime, who's going to say, "Oh, I'll endure it for the country"? Naturally, there would be massive backlash. Bin Salman ran a very cold calculation here. To push through this painful reform, I first need to clear out anyone who talks back to me. In the end, that glamorous Ritz-Carlton purge we saw in part 1 was actually the groundwork to make this dangerous gamble succeed. Bin Salman began his frantic sprint not because he lacked fear, but because he lacked time. He tried to drag Saudi onto a new path even if it meant completely smashing the old order. But the new path he chose was so massive and unrealistic that it shocked the world once again. What is it? It's the bizarre city he's building in the middle of the desert for $500 billion. NEOM. Do you get a sense now of why bin Salman was in such a hurry to gather power? But the project he started with that power and money is truly extraordinary. In the wilderness of northwestern Saudi, a desert that is stiflingly hot by day and bone-chillingly cold by night, bin Salman announced the largest project in human history. It's called NEOM. The line, at its center, truly left the world in a state of mental breakdown. Think about it. A giant mirror-walled city that is 170 kilometers long, 500 meters high, but only 200 meters wide. No cars, no roads, all infrastructure managed by AI, with 9 million people living vertically. This is less like urban planning and more like a declaration to build a sci-fi movie set. Here's what we need to look at coldly. This plan is very attractive, but there's one fatal flaw. Most of the technology NEOM presented doesn't even exist on this Earth yet. The technology to connect 500 meters high mirror walls for 170 kilometers, a structure that leaves the lives of 9 million people entirely to AI. There's no way bin Salman doesn't know this is nearly impossible for now. But he chose to force an impossible-looking future into reality. It's a massive self-proof. Naturally, the cost is beyond imagination. The initial announcement was $500 billion, but global investment banks expect the actual cost to soar to at least $1 trillion or even $2 trillion. It's the most expensive city project in human history. But here, another contradiction arises. Where does this astronomical money come from? In the end, it's oil again. It's an ironic structure where if oil prices shake even a little, cracks will immediately appear in the mirror walls of NEOM. Even more chilling are the tears of blood hidden beneath this glamorous future city. To build NEOM, they forcibly evicted the Hawitat tribe, who had protected that land for centuries. One young man cried out on social media, "We are not beings to be sacrificed for the future." But he was eventually arrested and sentenced to death. Taking lives in the present to build the future, this is where the international community began to call NEOM the City of Human Rights Controversy. NEOM thus became a strange place, receiving both praise as the future of humanity and criticism as a blood-stained mirage. But the criticism pouring onto bin Salman didn't end there. In 2018, an event occurred that once again drove the world into shock and horror. It's the story of a man who disappeared without a trace from a consulate, the Jamal Khashoggi incident. Now, it's time to open the darkest and coldest chapter of this story. The 2nd of October 2018, in front of the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, a man is standing there. His name is Jamal Khashoggi. He was a very influential journalist from Saudi Arabia. He just walked through the consulate doors to get a single marriage document. He thought a new life would begin once he passed through that door. But the last image of him on CCTV was just that. There is footage of him entering the door, but never of him coming back out. Who was waiting inside? It was a 15-member special hit squad that had flown in secretly from Saudi Arabia. Their goal was one: to eliminate Khashoggi inside the consulate and erase all traces. The analysis by Turkish intelligence and the CIA was more brutal than any horror movie. He was threatened, and when he refused, he died immediately. What's even more shocking is what happened after. Experts at the scene attempted to dismember the body and use chemical treatments to erase the evidence. This wasn't just an act of anger. It was a removal operation, meticulously designed at the state level. Right after the incident, Saudi Arabia put forward very embarrassing lies. They said, he left safely, then changed it to, a fistfight broke out inside and he died accidentally. But the CIA's conclusion was cold. Disposing of an individual of this stature is absolutely impossible without the approval of Saudi's top authority, bin Salman. U.S. media also simultaneously pointed to the Crown Prince as the mastermind behind the murder order. With this incident, the image of the young reformer that bin Salman had worked so hard to build was shattered in an instant. He became a diplomatic pariah on the world stage. Global companies boycotted investments in Saudi, and the world saw bin Salman's true face, the face of an absolute ruler who says, "Whoever blocks my path, I will chase them to the ends of the earth and erase them." Here, we can glimpse the very strange psychology of this man. He allowed women to drive for the first time in Saudi history, and stripped the power of the terrifying religious police. It is true that he removed the fear of having one's clothing monitored on the streets, but ironically, what happened to the female activists who fought their whole lives for the right to drive? They were thrown in jail right around the time the change was announced. This is the essence of bin Salman-style reform. Freedom is something I give you, not something you achieve. It's freedom within the permitted lines, where criticism is never allowed. A surveillance system that sentences someone to decades in prison for a single critical post on social media, and an open-minded leader who puts steering wheels in the hands of women. These two faces coexist very strangely within this one man. A leader who wields absolute power for the sake of speed, and a ruler who clears away anything hindering that speed, even if it means shedding blood. Is he a hero who will save Saudi Arabia, or a pharaoh building his own fortress? Now, Saudi stands at the most dangerous crossroads that no one has ever traveled before. Now, it's time to fit the last piece of this giant narrative. Actually, bin Salman's unstoppable actions didn't just shake the interior of Saudi Arabia, it also strangely twisted the oil for security alliance with the U.S. that had been solid for over 80 years. Originally, Saudi and the U.S. had a very cool contractual relationship. Saudi provided oil stably, and the U.S. protected Saudi's security. But when the U.S. shale revolution happened, this board started to break. From the U.S. perspective, Saudi oil wasn't as critical as before. On top of that, when the U.S. applied pressure over human rights issues, especially the Khashoggi case, bin Salman felt insulted. His sentiment of, "Are you trying to tell me what to do in my own house just because you protect my security?" was clearly revealed. Of course, they can't just break up immediately. Saudi still needs advanced U.S. weapons, and the U.S. desperately needs the strategic base of Saudi for Middle East stability. So, they continue an uncomfortable cohabitation, smiling on the outside while hiding knives on the inside. The new option bin Salman chose during this gap is China. China is a friend who speaks the same language to Saudi. They don't nag about human rights, they buy a massive amount of oil, and they even lend AI or telecommunication technology needed for NEOM without a word. Bin Salman's calculation is clear. Saudi will no longer depend on one country. We will play with whoever benefits us, whether it's the U.S. or China. It's a kind of hedging strategy. But the mountains bin Salman must climb aren't just the superpowers. The rapid growth of his neighbor, the UAE, has also been a serious irritant. Watching Dubai thrive as the center of the Middle East, the pride of Saudi, which claims to be the leader of the region, won't allow it. So, giant projects like NEOM are also a desperate struggle for Saudi to reclaim the status of, "I am the real boss of the Middle East." Look at this. Bin Salman is only in his late 30s. Barring any major surprises, he could rule Saudi for more than 50 years. This means the fate of a nation for the next half-century depends on this one man's judgment. If the vision he draws succeeds, Saudi will become a superpower that commands the world even without oil. But what if it fails? NEOM will remain as a giant pyramid ruin in the desert, and Saudi might collapse under unbearable debt and internal discontent. A man with two faces, the reformer and the absolute ruler. Will he be the wise king who leads the desert kingdom into the future? Or the last pharaoh building his own fortress? Saudi Arabia now stands at the largest crossroads in its history, and the result of that choice, only time will tell.